By the end of this lecture, you are going to be building this simple but professional looking responsive registration / sign up form using CSS Flexbox from scratch with step-by-step instructions. Let's get started. The first step is to setting up the project. Create a folder on your desktop called signup-form, launch Visual Studio Code Editor, and open up the folder by going to the File, Open Folder, and choose the Sign Up Form folder. Now let's create two files in it, index.html and style.css. Pretty straightforward. Let's create a basic HTML skeleton structure inside the index.html file. I'm going to type HTML5 and Visual Studio Code gives me the autocomplete, and hit enter. It puts the default HTML5 markup code, nothing fancy. Let's change the title, sign up form, to be more appropriate. Now let's link the style.css file to the index.html file. Inside the head tags, create a link tag with two attributes which are rel and href. The value of href is the CSS file that I want to link to, in this case style.css, and the value of the rel attribute will be style sheet, like so. Now I'm going to add a CSS rule for body tag to make sure that the CSS file is linked correctly. Open up the style.css file, type body, opening and closing curly braces, background, red, like so. Let's run the application. I could simply go to the index.html file, open it up on the browser. However, I will have to refresh the browser in order to see the recent changes, but there is a better way using live server extension on Visual Studio Code. This extension will automatically refresh the browser every time when I save, so that I can see the newly changed content. To install the live server, go to Visual Studio Code. At the top left, Preferences, Extension, then type live server. From the search bar on the top left, choose the first option and click install. As you can see, I have already installed it. That's why I have the uninstall button instead of the install button. Once it's installed, press Command, Option and P for Mac, then click live server open with the live server option, which will start running the server and automatically open up the browser. As you can see, my project is currently running on 127.0.1:5500 URL. Let's change the background color to blue, then save it, switch back to the browser, and the background color of the body tag has been automatically changed to blue. Nice. Now I have successfully set up the project. The second step is to create a sign up form element and center it to the screen horizontally and vertically, like this. Let me just zoom out a bit by pressing Command -sign for Mac, so that you can see the form is always centered to the screen in both directions, regardless of its size. In the index.html file, inside the body tag, opening closing form tags with the class name signup-form. Then type form text inside. Let's add the background color to the form element using the class name so that I can see where it's located on the browser. Inside the style.css file, right below the body selector, type .signup-form, opening closing curly braces. I'm going to set a gray background color, $EFFOF1, and you can see the form element is positioned at the top, taking the full width at the moment. Next, add the max width to 600. In CSS Flexbox, when we want to move an element to the center of the screen, we need to give 3 Flexbox properties to its parent element. In this case, the body tag is the parent of the form element. So the first Flexbox property is display flux. Let's add it to the body tag, which is the parent element of the form. So display flex. As you can see, when you add the display flex property, the width of the form is cleared out. In order to apply the width to the form again, we need to add a new property called flex with the value of 1 to the sign up form, which stretches the form width to its maximum width, in this case this 600 pixels. Also add the border radius to 10 pixel, which makes the sign up form have rounded corners. Nice. The second Flexbox property is inside the body selector, justify content center, which centered the form element horizontally to the browser window. Finally, the third Flexbox property is the align items center, which centered the form element vertically. As you can see, the form does not center vertically even after adding the align items. That's because we need to explicitly add the full height to the body. Inside the body selector, height 100 VH, vertical height. Now the form element is nicely centered to the browser. Third step is to create and design the form header. In the index.html file, inside the signup form element, get rid of the text and create a div with the class name form-header. In there, create h1 tags with the text create account. As you can see, the h1 tag has some default margin. Let's get rid of it. Instead of just getting rid of h1 tag default margin, I'm going to clear default margin of all the HTML elements in this page. So inside the style.css at the top, asterisks, which refer to all the elements in the index.html page, opening closing curly braces, margin 0, which get rid of default margin. Let's add the matching font family as well. In the final design, I used Roboto Google font. Let's import that at the top of the style.css file. So add import URL, opening closing curly braces, colon, https://fonts.googleapis.com/css ?family equals Roboto. Now let's add the font to all the text in the HTML page. So inside asterisk, type font-family, Roboto in quotes, comma, sans serif, like that. Now the font looks exactly like in our final design. Finally, I'm going to add the box sizing property inside the asterisk selector, border box. What this does is, for example, if you have a div element that has 100 pixel width, when you add 10 pixels padding to that element, it won't extend past the 100 pixels. The border box will not let padding influence the box width to go to 110 pixels, which is kind of cool. Now let's style the form header. So form header, I'm going to add the border bottom 1 pixel solid CC, which adds the border at the bottom of the form header div element. Then add padding 15 pixels for top and bottom and 0 pixel for left and right. Next, style the h1 element. So form header space h1 text align center, which center the text horizontally. Then change the font size to 28 pixels. Finally, add this text color to 666, which is dark gray. Looks good. The fourth step is to create and design the first and last name input fields. To do that, first create a form body wrapper div right below the form header element. So starting and ending div tags with the class name form-body. In there, create another div with the class name row, which is the wrapper for the first and last name 2-column input fields. Inside this div, I'm going to create 2 div elements with class name input-group. One for the first name, another one is for last name, like so. Each input group is going to have 2 HTML elements, which are the label and input field, like the final design. So inside the first input group, add a label element with the text first name inside, like that. Then add the input field right below it with the type text. Let's do the same to the last name. Inside the second input group element, add label tags with the text last name inside, then input tag with the type text. Nice and simple. Let's add some style to form body wrapper element. Inside style.css file, .form-body, opening closing curly braces, set the background color to white and add padding 5 pixels for top and bottom space 10 pixels for left and right space. As you can see, the first name and last name are sitting one below the other instead of one beside the other like the final design. All we have to do is to add display flex property to the div element with the class row. So dot row opening closing curly braces display flux, which automatically moves its children elements to one beside the other. In this case, the children elements are the div elements that have input group class in them. At this stage, the first name and last name input groups do not take the full width. Let's change that by using flex property inside each input group element. So dot input hyphen group opening closing curly braces flex :1, which actually stretches both input group elements to equal width to fill the full width of the sign up form. In this case, 50% width for the first name and 50% width for the last name. Nice. At this stage, the label and input fields are sitting beside each other instead of one below the other, similar to our final design. To change that, we just need to add 2 Flexbox properties to the input group selector. The first one is display flex and the second one is the flux direction column, which pushes the input field right below the label. Perfect. Let's add some margin to the input group so that the input fields are not touching each other. Margin 10 pixel for top and bottom space and 5 pixel for left and right space. Next, let's style the label and input field. So label opening closing curly braces, add text color $1BBA93, which is greenish color. Set the font size to 17 pixels. Looks good. Let's match the input field style as well. This time I'm going to be using input tag as a selector with the type text. So input opening closing square brackets type equals text in quotes opening closing curly braces. First I'm going to set the width of the input field to 100%. Then add the font size to 18 pixels, height 34 pixels. Then give padding left 10 pixels and padding right 10 pixels. Change the color to dark gray, which is 666. add border with light gray color, then add the border radius 4 pixels, set the background color to white, remove the outline. Looks perfect. Now we have successfully created and designed first and last name 2-column input layout. The fifth step is to create and style the email field, which is super easy because I have created all the styles that we need already. Let's create the HTML markup for email similar to the first and last name, but the only difference is the email will be a single column. Inside the index.html file, right after the first and last name row div element, create div tags with row class for email. In there, define a single div with the class name input group. In there, declare starting and ending label tags with email text inside. Finally, the input tag with the type email. Everything looks good except the input field style. That's because I have created a style for the input field that has text type earlier. To apply the same style to the email, all I have to do is to go to the input CSS rule and type comma input type email. That's it. As you can see, I am reusing the input style for first name, last name and the email. Nice. The sixth step is password and confirm password, which are pretty straightforward and easy to create and design, very similar to first and last name. As usual, right after an email element, declare div tags with the class row. Then create 2 div elements inside with the class name input group, which is very similar to first and last name. Hope you can see the pattern now. In the first input group, create label element with the password text inside. Right below, define input tag with the type password, like so. Do the same to confirm password. Inside the second input group, add label tags with confirm password text, then add the input tag with type password. Finally, add the input type password to the existing input CSS rule, similar to what I have done for email. Pretty simple and fast. Looking good. Moving on to the step number 7, which is creating a 2-column layout for gender and hobbies. Inside index.html file, right after the password, define another div with the class row for gender and hobbies. It's going to have 2 div elements with the class name input group, one for gender and another one for hobbies. Inside the first input group, define label tags with the text gender. As you can see, the gender input is a radio buttons, so create a div element with the class name radio-group, which is where I'll be adding 3 radio buttons with the labels for male, female and other. So create a wrapper div, then add label tags. In between the label tags, type the text male. Right before that, define input field with the type radio, like so. Let's do the same for female and other options. Right after the first wrapper div, inside the radio group, define one for female option. In there, create label tags with input type radio and text female. Do the same thing one more time for other. As you can see, the radio buttons are aligned vertically, one below the other, instead of horizontally, similar to the final design. To do that, all we have to do is to add a single Flexbox property. Yes, you have guessed it right, which is display flex, to the parent of all the radio button wrapper divs, which is the radio group. Inside the CSS file, .radio-group, opening closing curly braces, display flex. Looks nice. Now let's split the width of the 3 radio buttons equally. To do that, add flex property with a value of 1 to the radio button wrapper div elements. So dot radio hyphen group space div opening closing curly braces flex with a value of 1. Perfect. Let's change the text color to gray instead of green. So radio group label color 666, which is darker gray, and cursor pointer, which will show the hand sign when you mouse over radio buttons. Here is the problem. When I click the second radio button, the first button is not unchecked, which is not the normal behavior of radio button. To select only one radio button at a time, all we have to do is to add the name attribute to each radio button with the same value. In this case, gender. Inside the input tag, type name equals gender in quotes. Do the same to the other 2 input tags. Let's try it again. As I click all 3 radio buttons, only one is selected at a time, which is exactly what we wanted. Next, moving to hobbies. Unlike gender, one person can have more than one hobby at a time. For that reason, I'll be using checkbox instead of radio button. Inside the second input group, create label tags with the text hobbies. Then create a wrapper div for all of the checkboxes with the class name checkbox-group. Inside the checkbox group, create 4 div elements for music, cook, travel, and movie checkboxes. Inside the first div element, define label tags, create an input tag type checkbox with the text music. Let's do the same for the other 3 checkboxes. Inside the second div, create label tags. In there, add input type checkbox, then the label text cook. The third one is going to be travel, so label input type checkbox travel text. Finally, checkbox with the text movie label tags checkbox the text movie. Next, add display flex to the checkbox group class to align all of the checkboxes horizontally. So after the radio group class, hit comma, then dot checkbox hyphen group. Let's take a look at. Now I'm going to give equal width to all of the checkbox wrapper divs, similar to what I have done for radio buttons. Go to this radio group div CSS rule, hit comma, type dot checkbox hyphen group space div. Finally, change the label text color. After the radio group space label selector, hit comma, type checkbox group label. That's it. Looking good. Next, I'm going to create 2 column layout for source of income and income. As you can see, the source of income is a select drop down list and the income is input slider with the label on the right. As I move the slider, the text on the right changes. Let's see that in action. As usual, create a div tags with the row class right after the gender hobbies row element. Then create 2 div elements with the class name input group. Inside the first input group, create label tags with the text source of income inside. Now create a drop down list. So define select element. In there, create 3 option elements like so. The first option element with the text employed. The second one is for self-employed. The third one is for unemployed. and looks okay, but the drop down list thickness it's smaller than the final design. To fix it, all I have to do is to add a select tag reference to the existing input CSS rule. So hit comma and type select. Switch back to the browser and it looks exactly like the final design. Next, let's create an income slider. Inside the second input group element, create label tags with the text income. Then declare a wrapper div element with the class name range group. In there, create an input tag with the type range and the label tags with an ID income label, and add the default text to it, which is 20 space K. This label will show the income ranging between 20 to 200 using simple JavaScript code, which I will be showing in just a moment. First, let's set the minimum and maximum values for the slider. So inside the input tag, add min and max attribute with 20 and 200 values respectively. Also add the step attribute with the value 5. That means when a slider moves, it increases or decreases by 5. Time to add some style to the input and label. First, I'm going to make the range group to Flexbox. So dot range hyphen group, opening closing curly braces, display flex. Then I'm going to make the input range slider the full width using flex property with a value of 1. So dot range hyphen group space input, opening closing curly braces, flex 1. This actually pushes the label to the right. Now let's design the label. So dot range hyphen group space label, opening closing curly braces. First, I'm going to give margin left 10 pixels. Background color is going to be $1BB893. The text color is going to be white. The border radius to be 5 pixels. Padding is going to be 5 pixels all around. Add font size to 17 pixels. Finally, center the text. And looking good, but when I move the slider, the label does not change. Let's fix that using JavaScript. First, attach an onChange event to the input element with the callback function called change slider value, opening closing parenthesis. This function takes one argument, which is this dot value. What that does is every time when you change the slider, the onChange event will be triggered and the change slider value function will be called, and the current value of the slider will be passed through this dot value argument. Now let's create a change slider value function inside JavaScript. Right below the ending body tag, create script tags. In there, declare the function. So const space change slider value equals opening closing parenthesis value equals angle bracket opening closing curly braces. The parameter value will capture the income range between 20 and 200 depending on where the slider is moved. Now all I have to do is to assign that value to the label inside this function. So let's get the reference to the label using its ID, document.getElementById, opening closing parenthesis, income label in quotes, dot inner text equals the value which is passed into this function plus space K in quotes. Switch back to the browser and it works like a charm. Perfect. The 9th step is to create and design the profile picture and age inputs. Declare a div element with row. As you can see, I am reusing the row class like the base 2-column layout throughout the form design. Pretty cool, eh? Then create 2 two div elements with the class input group inside. Inside the first input group, create a label for upload profile picture and input tag with type of file. Inside the second input group, create another label for age, add the input tag as well. This time the input type is going to be a number. Now let's add these two new input types to the existing input CSS selector. So hit comma, input type file, comma, input type number. As you can see, the input type file creates the choose file button. When I click the button, it opens up the default file explorer window from your computer so that we can choose a file, which is the default behavior of input file type. The input type number for age creates up and down arrows on the right side of the input field. You can click the up and down arrow to increase or decrease a number, or you can simply type only a number in the input field. Nice. The final input of this form is the bio, which is the text area box where you can add multiple lines unlike input fields. The bio is going to be a single column right after the previous row element, div tags with the row, then another div tag with the class name input group inside, create label tags with the text bio, and text area tags like so. Let's change the text area style. So inside the input CSS selector, so comma text area. Nice. If you look at the text area box at the bottom right side, and you can use that to resize the text area box horizontally or vertically, which is the default behavior of it. Let's change that. Inside the style.css file, text area, opening closing curly braces, resize none, which gets rid of the resize handler from the bottom right side of the text area box so that there will be no option for resizing. Then I'm going to set the height to 100 pixels like so. If the text exceeds the height of the text area, it will automatically create a scroll bar without expanding its height. At this stage, I have successfully created all the form body input elements. Next, let's create and design a form footer. So after the ending div tag for the form body element, define div tags with the class name, you have guessed it right, form-footer. In there, create button tags with the class name btn. Inside the button tags, add create like so. Now let's move the create button on the right. Inside the style.css, create a new CSS rule for form footer. So dot form-footer, opening closing curly braces, the footer to a flexbox using display flex. To horizontally move the button to the right, use justify content and set its value to flex-end. Finally, add padding 15 pixels all around. Looks fine. Let's style the button next. So dot btn, opening closing curly braces, first padding 10 pixels for top and bottom, space 20 pixels for left and right. Then add background color 1BBA93, set font size to 17 pixels, get rid of border and add border radius 5 pixels, color £sign BC F5E7, finally cursor pointer. Looks great. At this stage, the sign up form looks great in the desktop version. However, when I shrink the browser to the mobile view size, the input elements are synced and hard to interact with. To make it mobile friendly, I'm going to do two things. The first one is to keep all of the 2-column input groups to a single column. Then I'm going to make the button full width. To do that, create a media query for the width up to 600 pixels. So inside style.css file, add media space only space screen space and opening closing parenthesis max width 600 pixels opening closing curly braces. Any CSS rule you will add inside these curly braces will only be applied to the screen size 600 pixels or less. To convert all of the 2-column layouts to single column, all I have to do is to change the flex direction of the row class to column like that. And here is the magic. You can see all the input elements are single column layout, nicely positioned one below the other. Cool. But the top part of the form is cut off for some reason. Let's fix it. Go to the sign up form CSS rule and add margin top auto and margin bottom auto, which will show the top part of the sign up form. Great. Finally, let's change the width of the button. To do that, create dot button selector inside the media query and add the flex property with the value of 1, which stretches the button width. That's awesome. Now you can see the sign up form is nicely centered in the desktop view. Shrink to mobile view, the sign up form input fields are nicely laid out one below the other, similar to our final design. There you have it. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing to Soft Author YouTube channel for more videos like that. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.